Welcome to Crafty Hints. I'm Chantel. Today we'll be doing 4 Halloween DIYs. I'm not quite into the super spooky Halloween, but these are a little bit fun and maybe a tiny bit spooky, so I hope that you enjoy. Let's get to DIY 1. For this DIY, I started off with this little wooden house from the Dollar Tree. And I just mixed some black and some white acrylic paint. Just some apple barrel paint. And I'm just going to go over both sides. I did water it down even just a little bit, so it looked a little weathered. Then I took these wooden stir sticks. You could definitely use craft sticks or, obviously whatever you think would work best for you. So I put those underneath the windows to make window panes. And now the peak on this part of the house, I just decided to make them staggered right up to the tip of that house. So just continuing to cut them down with some scissors. These stir sticks are rounded at the tip. And so I cut off one of the little rounds and put that, so instead of the pointy tip of that peak, I'm using the rounded tip of the coffee stir. You can get these coffee stirrers sometimes at the Dollar Tree. I had gotten a big pack on Amazon, and my goodness, I've used them for over a year. Use them for so many occasions. I've used them to frame little things for my tiered trays, so I'd say that they were a worthwhile investment. Now, after I got those all done, I just went over them with my paint mixture there, and now I'm just aging it a bit with a chip brush with a little bit of white, a little bit of gray, a little bit of black. Whatever you want to do to just give this an old, weathered look of a house. This house has been around for 100 years and it looks it. So just make it, as aged as you'd like. Now, I picked this up from Walmart. It's some spider web and it stretches, what did that say, 16 feet into 200 feet. So you'll definitely get your money's worth here. And I just wanted to put some cobwebs through the windows and things like that. You could also use those coffee stir sticks and board up a couple windows or board up the door if you wanted to. I thought about making some shutters, but with the windows tipped a little bit, it was going to be a little bit awkward to do. So this is the way I decided to go. And you just spread these spider webs around until it looks just as spooky as you'd like it to. You can use some of those wood edges to, catch the spider webs on. As we all know, those cobwebs seem to be in every corner, if you don't tend to them. So, especially an old abandoned home. And I just took them through each of the windows, and I'm just adhering it on the back, but it doesn't look super messy even if you look at it from the back because it's just the spider webs. So I went around and then I used these Rubons that I also found at the Dollar Tree. I put a couple spiders, a couple mice. I think I even put a raven up towards the top, and a few ghosts. It just, gives it a little bit more of that old spooky house. Now I took some Spanish moss. I'm just clipping off a little bit, and I'm going to glue that on the ledge. And you just press that into the hot glue and tack it down in other areas that you might want it to cover. I wanted that ledge covered just a little bit. Now I took some of these rings from the Dollar Tree. These are bat rings. I thought there were some spiders in there also, but there wasn't. So I took some of these bats and I kind of bent them up just so it looks like the bats are flying. I clipped them a little bit here or there so that they'd fit in exactly where I wanted them to. You have to let me know below. Are you into just a more cartoony and fun Halloween? That's kind of my side. Or do you like super spooky, ghouly? I don't know. It's just not me. But I try to do just a few here that are just enough of that if that's your thing, you might enjoy. So I just continued to put these little bat wings wherever I could find spots where they might work well. And here it is. Ooh, so spooky. All right, DIY2. This is a trick-or-treat sign. These came 2 in a pack. I've used them for other things. If you find them, you might want to grab them. They are great for crafting. You can just flip it over on the back. The paper also comes off rather easily on the other side. If you add just a little bit of water, it seems to come right off. So I took some white and some black and just kind of made a gray, just a little bit lighter than I made the house. And I just kept layering the paints until it looked like I wanted it to. I'm going to take a few more of these rub-on transfers. I'm grabbing that Trick or Treat. And these are just so easy to do. You know, you're just taking a little craft stick and rubbing that right on there. I did notice this was still a little bit wet, so I took my heat gun over it and dried it a little bit further, but I thought it might take just a little bit longer. I took some of those dominoes that you can get from the Dollar Tree. They're wood on one side and paper on the other, and I just glued 2 together to be my platform for my sign. Then I took a tumbling tower block and glued that down. So I'm just taking that mixture and going back over these to match the sign. Now that it's dry, I'm just going to set this down, rub it with the craft stick. You could also use like a old gift card or something like that to help rub this down. Or if you have a Cricut, you could use your scraper there too. If you see any spots catching, just give it another little rub. And there we are. Now I thought I'd add a couple spiders. I apologize to any of you that have arachnophobia. I do not. I'm not real fond of them, but they're not super scary to me. My paintbrush had been in my water, so I just took that over the top of those transfers, just so you didn't have that little bit of white edge around it. It seemed to blend it in rather well. Now I'm just going to take some more of that spider web, and I want to make sure it covers up that hole. Now I also want to drape it over the edge of my sign so that it kind of looks like those spiders on there have been making their little web across the sign. And I probably should have covered up the back of this one, but it will be sitting in front of something that will cover up the back. I did stuff a little bit of web into that hole to disguise it just a little bit. And I'll put just a little bit more web to help disguise that hole just a little bit further. You could definitely use spackling or wood putty to cover that hole as well. I just took the paintbrush back over that spider also. Now I'm going to just make sure this is adhered. So a little bit of glue across the back to hold it tight. And here we are. Just a quick, simple sign. They go together rather well. Let's get to DIY3. To carry on this spider theme, I found this little spider web basket at the Dollar Tree. I also have that pillar candle holder, and I'm just adding some glue around the edges and some hot glue in the middle to glue this down. I also decided on each side of kind of the spokes, so to speak, of the spider web. Gosh, if you know what those are called, let me know down below. I did glue on each side of those just to make it extra secure. This one was a little bit harder to film with the height of the pillar candle. Maybe I should have glued that spider on first. I apologize. So I just put a little bit of glue on his back legs. And he did take just a little bit of time for that glue to set. So then I flipped it over and I put some glue on the back, just making sure it stays secure. Now I just took my heat gun, any of that glue or little spidery webs of glue that are hanging off. There was a little bit of a glob there that I just didn't want to be able to see, so I just used a little bit of those heat guns. It's a really cheap heat gun. It was around $10. I'll link that down below. It just comes in handy on so many crafts. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the spider web, and I just wanted to kind of go around him. You could have done it first and kind of, moved him in and out of it, but I thought it'd be easier to get him secured so that the web's coming right off of him. He's not kind of poking through. And I don't want this totally across because I'm still going to put candy underneath the spider web a bit. But I definitely wanted to make it just a little bit realistic, like, oh my goodness, this spider really made this web. And now I just took it down the pillar candle holder as well, so that it doesn't just stop at that basket. Just a tiny little dab of glue does it. Just kind of pulled it around and attached it here and there. Pretty quick and easy DIYs. I can't wait for you to tell me below which one you liked best. Do you decorate for Halloween or do you just decorate for fall? I've found that I mostly decorate for fall now that my kids are grown. We used to maybe do a little bit more Halloween or maybe a few stickers on the windows. They like to do those too. But right now, I'm mostly just decorated for fall because it'll flow right in with Thanksgiving for me. All right, just finishing up that spider web, wrapping it around him and the basket. And I think it turns out pretty cute. And here's with candy. DIY4. Okay, this one's a little bit on the spooky side. I took this bottle that I had, I think it was teriyaki sauce, and now I just took one of my paint markers. You could use a dry erase marker, chalk marker, whatever you'd like to use. And I just wrote toad legs. Now I'm taking my hot glue gun and I'm just going right over those words. This will make the letters a little bit more 3D. You could also use some of your puff paint. That would work also. And, you know, if those letters, I probably could have made the words just a little bit bigger. It was a little bit harder for like the A. But you just go right around them. If you mess up, you could definitely take, an X-Acto knife. You could totally scrape it off and start over or straighten it. I used the tip of the glue gun to just open up the center of the E and, just fix that. I probably could have just scraped this off and, done another E. It would have been just as easy as what I'm doing here, but just showing you that it doesn't go perfect always the first time. Now I'm taking some black apple barrel multi-surface paint, and it's just black. I like this paint because it works on, just about any surface, including black. And so I just gave this a few coats until it looked the way I wanted it to. I wanted it to kind of look like it has an old label behind the words. I'd seen the folk art multi-surface, but I hadn't seen the apple barrel, so that was pretty neat. That was one that Plaid had sent me. So I did take my heat gun to start that drying process a little bit quicker. And now I'm taking some of those rings I showed you earlier. And I wouldn't use the skull rings myself, so I just cut off the ends of those and cut some of the bits of the skull to make frog legs. Now I'm taking some brushed gold. You could use brass, you could use any bit of metallic, just to make it kind of look like it was, an old metal label that was stamped on there, but just gave it a fun effect. And you can do it while the black is a little bit wet on the letters so that it blends a little bit. I end up just adding a little bit of paint to this craft stick, the black also. There's that paint I was talking about. And, just mixing that in. I don't want them to look perfect. I want it to look like this bottle was found in a dusty old cupboard somewhere, or something like that. So just keep blending the paints until it looks the way you want it to. Again, nothing here needs to be perfect. And now I am sorry, I thought my camera had started. It did not. All I did was take water, some green food coloring, a little bit of blue, and a little bit of cornstarch. And I got to this, I'm adding a bit more green. I did even take that black paintbrush then and just swirl that around in there. But it didn't really need it. It just made it a bit darker. And I have those bits of rings in there, but they really float to the top. So I don't know that you necessarily need them in there either. Now I am gluing on some jute twine. Oh, that didn't want to cut well that way. Let's get some scissors. Just one dab of glue. And now I'm just wrapping it all the way around up to the top. You could also take your paintbrush then and, when it's just wet and has a tiny bit of that paint on it, rub that across your twine and it'll help it so it doesn't look so brand new. That's what I did afterwards. I'm like, that just looks too polished. It just doesn't match what I'm going for. So that was one step that I didn't film that I saw later. So just get that on there. And then I took the lid and, just a little bit of black paint so it's not a shiny lid. You could add some of that brushed gold on there too. And here's how it turned out. Kind of spooky. I do appreciate you watching, and I appreciate each of you that have subscribed. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I do want you to be able to be one of my friends and family here. But we'll take one more look at what we made today. Please do like and subscribe. It really does help my channel to grow, and that's really my goal here. I want to keep creating fun DIYs. I can't wait for the holiday season. I have so many fun ideas to come. Thank you so much for watching.